You got it. Back-to-back episodes. Never done this part before. We've never gone back-to-back, but I felt it was so important. I had some incredible conversations today with my friend Adley this morning, and I had a conversation with my brother. And I believe that these conversations are on purpose. It's amazing, and we're doing the corresponding proverb, corresponding day. If you're tuning in for the first time, we've got a playlist on YouTube that is the wisdom and the vibe, and it takes you through the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day. I've been reading these for 30 years, and it's been amazing because I run not everything because I mess up a lot, but I run, when things work, I have run them through the filter of Proverbs. And when I look at it, it's amazing how many different situations or circumstances that are happening in my life. My daughter had this experience the other day. We were listening to Bob Marley, and she said, I never heard the song the way that I hear it now. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, I've been listening to this forever, but I thought it said something else. And I said, well, what'd you think it said? And why is it different? And she said, I think it's just because I'm at a different point in my life. And I said, well, it was the same song, right? And she said, yeah, but I hear it different. I said, that's exactly like Proverbs, the exact same words on a different day because of your circumstances, because of what you're going through. A lot of times you'll hear it a little bit different. And I asked her, so what song is it? And she said, oh, that song. She pointed at it. It was Stir It Up. And that Stir It Up by Bob Marley, she thought it was saying exterior. And when I said exterior to the music, and I want you to do this, to the chorus, it actually sounded like it. But it was because of where she was at in her life at the time. And she said that, Dad, I could hear the exact same song, but I can hear it different because of where I'm at. And that's what I find with Proverbs, the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day. Today is March 17, 2024, and we are going through Proverbs 17. The question that hit me so many times this morning is, how important are my systems? How important are my systems? Like the systems that I use in my business, that I use in my life, that I use in my relationships, all these things. But let's do it to business today. We're going to be covering peace, prudence, heart, discernment, love, and cheer. But how important are my systems? Proverbs 17, corresponding proverb, corresponding day, 3,000-year-old wisdom. Let's get this party started.
Cause we believing it's for certain. We put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting right before your eyes. So it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
How important are my systems? How important are my systems? Let's stick to the business part of it today because this has been a conversation I had with my big brother, Rob. And also, too, I want you to know when we go live like this, for me, I love being able to take risks. I love being able to take a little bit of risk and say, like, God, are you going to deliver on this? And I can tell you this, he never disappoints. It's unbelievable how the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day that was written 3,000 years ago, when I run it through the filter, it's amazing. So when a person asks me, how important are my systems? There's a couple of things that I ask, and I'll give you the questions. Number one is like, what do we ultimately want to accomplish, right? So what do we want to accomplish? Well, that's going to help us to understand and be able to set up the systems in the first place. Right? Because we could set a system, and most of the time what I find is that people will create their systems by default, right? Now, I've said it before, and I said it in my book, the vibe that's right behind me. that your systems are nothing more than a list of your screw ups, right? But how can we then start to learn and start to put things in line? And I'll put it in perspective. When we first started our company years and years ago, it was probably almost 20 years ago, we had 4 employees. And so with 4 employees, what I said is we got to meet every single Tuesday. Well, all of them argued with me and said, well, why do we need to do this? And I'd make them stand up in a circle of, there was only 5 of us, 4 employees and myself. And they would have to say who inspired them that week, why they inspired them. They'd have to say their name. And then they would have to say a request of what they would like to be lifted up in or what they'd like to learn this week. And what happened is when we first did it, I learned because the first person went for like a minute and a half, then second person, because they went a minute and a half, then they went 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and it just took forever. So then what we did is we created a system based off of that we were going to ultimately grow to 85 to 100 people inside of our company. So I put a time limit on it. So before we started I put a time limit. I said, we're going to do this within 15 seconds. Or it was actually a minute at the time. So within a minute, you're going to say someone who inspired you. You're going to say their name, why they inspired you, but you have to be specific. And then you're going to say something you would like to work on or something you'd like to learn this week. And we did it within the minute. But then I started to realize, okay, well, if I grew to 100, well, that would take 100 minutes. 100 minutes is an hour and 40 minutes. So I couldn't accomplish this meeting in an hour. So then I started to do the math and I created a system that said, okay, we're going to do this in 15 seconds. Now, some people said that's completely impossible, but it wasn't impossible because we did it. And we gave them 15 seconds and we made it a game and we made them feel kind of cool with it. And within the 15 seconds, they had to say someone who inspired them, why they inspired them specifically, and then something they'd like to work on or something that they would like to learn this week. And what I found was when I put a time frame on it, they were able to do it quite efficiently. Well, that took us to when we had 85 employees, right? So let's take it to 80 employees. Well, for every 15 seconds, there's 15 seconds 4 times in a minute. So that took 4 people, right? So for every minute, we could get 4 people to be able to go. So if that was the case, 80 people only took 20 minutes. And we added 85, so it was, it was 81, 82 minutes, or 22 minutes, 21, 22 minutes with 85 people, and every single person in the company could speak. And the reason why I say this is because systems are so important, but we have to ask, like, where are we going? If you know where you're going, then we can apply the systems that will be able to work inside of that. Now, to understand, like, where our systems are at, they're a list of our screw-ups, but then we have to have some foresight or some prudence, as it would say in Proverbs 17, that we have thought of the future. What is that thought of the future? When you slow down, when you calm down, when you step away from the cash flow, when you step away from the debt, when you step away from all those things for a second, and you breathe, and you ask yourself, okay, what is my system? Is my system set up for high performance, or is my system set up for me to be able to survive in what I have right now? And if your systems are set that way, when you grow to where you want to go, what'll happen is it'll start to burst at the seams, and then we go into panic mode. And I see this happen with so many companies and brands. They get to a point, they expand, and they're like, oh my gosh, frantically. And then they get mad at their people and they force their people, oh, you got to do more with less. You got to, you got to communicate this. You got to do this. You got to do that. As opposed to saying, let's take a step back, take a breath, and say, where do we ultimately want to go? And here's the questions. Number one is, how can I quantify? Well, number one is, where do you ultimately want to take this thing, or where do you want to go? We develop the systems based off that. Then inside that, number two is, how can I quantify results, right? How can I quantify the results of the systems that I'm putting in play? Number two is, how long are you committed? Because this will tell me a lot. So when I work with a person or work with a brand, I don't work with individuals, but when I work with a brand or a company, then I say, how long are you committed? Because that will tell me if they're committed to, hey, I need to get these results within a month. I'm not your guy. I need to get it within a year. I can kind of work with that. I want to have a sustainable brand over time. Okay, cool. We're able to create some systems for that kind of thing. Now, it doesn't mean that if you're in a short-term kind of scenario, but I find that when we do a quick fix, people are putting a Band-Aid on it as opposed to wanting to actually make a difference. The next one is, what are the KPIs? The KPIs or key performance indicators are very, very important because it'll kind of tell the story for us. And then the last question is, how do you want to feel at the end? How do you want to feel at the end? Because I don't think enough people take the time to ask themselves this: how do I want to feel at the end of all the things that I do? Okay, well, I want to create, the greatest law firm in the world. I want to create the greatest real estate firm in the world. But most people don't start with the question, how do I want to feel at the end? Because they get to a point where they accomplished all the goals, and then they have to go to a place where they're jumping off buildings or racing fast cars because they don't feel okay in what it is that they're doing. But if we can construct that and we start it with that in mind, then we can put those systems into place. And so the answer to the question of how important are your systems, I believe that your systems are probably one of the most important, although the most important is the way that people feel about your systems that either are consuming the product or that are actually building it. So your team and your consumer, the way that they feel about your systems will give the actual power to it, and that is the actual vibe. I used to think the vibe was my energy that I brought into a room, but what I've realized is it's the way that people feel when I leave that's the most important, and that is actually my vibe. When a person says, I really wasn't feeling the vibe, it wasn't about the energy that they felt in the place. It's how they felt about the energy. And when we switch that paradigm, everything shifts. So although we're going to be talking about systems today and how important they are, I want you to understand you can have the greatest systems in the world and the vibe be off and no one want to play with you. So let's go into that Proverbs. So Proverbs 17, it's amazing. So how can I quantify the results? Most businesses are going to do it in three ways: cash flow, profit margins, or EBITDA. Right? And so cash flow is going to be the money that comes in, the top line revenue. Profit margin is going to be at the bottom edge. Profit margins for entrepreneurs a lot of times are skewed a little bit because they run a lot of things through their business. And then there's the EBITDA. The EBITDA is actually how you could quantify your business to be able to sell it for a multiple. So these are kind of things that a lot of times people look at it, but I ask this question is, how can I quantify the results? And when I work with a person, they're asking that same exact question. So in verse 1 through 3, it says, better a dry crust with peace and quiet than a house full of feasting with strife. A prudent servant will rule over a disgraceful son, and he will share in the inheritance as a family. The crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests your heart. So how do you really quantify results? Are you just looking at it and saying, like, I want to have the quickest possible? Well, when it says in verse 3, watch this, the crucible for silver and the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the heart of the company, right? The heart of the company or the vision. And if you have systems in play to be able to take advantage of people and just have the highest profit margin and take advantage of people, at some point, it's going to come to a head. And so that's why I want to ask, like, how do you actually quantify results? Is it from the top line revenue, which I wouldn't suggest? Is it from just the profit margins? Or do you need a really strong EBITDA because you want to have this to be a company that is going to be able to sell for a multiple? In verse 16 of Proverbs 17, it also says, why should fools have money in hand to buy wisdom when they are not able to understand it? How many times when we're thinking about a system, people are like, oh, what system can I get? How many times could you give them the system, and even if they succeeded, they wouldn't know what to do with it anyway? And a lot of times people build their systems based around the fear of being able to keep what they have, as opposed to the desire of being able to go after what it is that they truly want. In verse number 23, it says, the wicked accept bribes in secret to pervert the course of justice. How do you quantify your results? And then the last one is even fools are thought to be wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. So how do you quantify results? Are you willing to be patient and work through for the long haul? Next one is how long are you committed? And this is a big one when you're looking at systems and building them within your company, is how long are you committed to it? Because for me, if you're only committed for a month and you need those results, there's probably people out there that could do it, but it's not me, right? And I know that. If you're committed for a month, I don't know if that's going to work out either. For me, I'm a long haul guy. I'm a sustainable guy, and I want to look at and say, I want to look at the whole picture. I want to make sure that at the end that you feel amazing, that you're able to, whether it's be spending time with your family or spending time with your loved ones, or that you just want to accomplish the thing because you want to, not because you're going to prove it to someone else that you can. Right. And so I always ask that question when I go into developing systems for people and working with them is, how long are you committed to this? And it says a rebuke impresses a discerning person more than 100 lashes for a fool. A rebuke impresses a discerning person. There's a lot of people that I would tell them I wouldn't work with you, but that will impress a discerning person that says, oh, wow, maybe I should look at the fact that if he says, I don't want to work with you because you want a result too fast, well, a discerning person will see wisdom in that. But watch this, more than 100 lashes of a fool. A fool, a lot of times when they're just going after what it is they want, quick return, sometimes they go through and they get the tar beat out of them in business, but they won't learn from it, where the other person will learn from you actually saying no to them. In verse number 11, evildoers foster rebellion against God. The messenger of death will be sent against them. And so evildoers foster rebellion against God. And so when I think of that, I just replace the word God with, the ultimate vision of your company, right? And evildoers foster rebellion, because there's a lot of people out there, and even people inside your own business, that just want to see the return, but they're not locked into the vision. And so they'll rebel against something, but we have to make sure that we take the time to communicate with them. On verse number 13, evil will never leave the house of the one who pays back evil for good. How long are you committed? Are you committed for only when you get the exact results that you want, or are you committed for the long term? Number 20 is, one whose heart is corrupt does not prosper, but one whose tongue is perverse falls into trouble. That's verse number 20. Number 22, a cheerful heart is good medicine, but crushed spirit dries up the bones. How long are you committed? A cheerful heart is good medicine. And if you're committed for the long term, then you'll be able to stay joyous, not happy, but joyous, because you'll fall in love with your current circumstance, allow the magic to happen. And sometimes that magic will be in the delay. A discerning person, this is verse number 24, a discerning person keeps wisdom in view, but a fool's eyes wander to the ends of the earth. How long are you committed, right? And verse 26, if imposing a fine on the innocent is not good, surely to flog the officials is not right. So think of this. How long are you committed? Are you willing to do things in the short term that will get you fast profit, but it'll hurt and injure your brand in the future? That's a question that you should need to ask yourself. In the KPIs, what are your KPIs, or key performance indicators? When we understand what those are and what the key performance indicator for you is, then we can set the system in place based off of those. In verse number 7, it says, eloquent lips are unsuited for a godless fool. How much worse lying lips to a ruler, right? So it doesn't matter what your KPIs are if they're not communicated to everybody else. You see, siloed communication happens when my department that is in sales doesn't care about anything else but sales, which is their job, but they haven't communicated what their key performance indicators are to make them at the highest level. Well, if they're talking to research and development, that would be that I need to make sure that our product is accessible. But to the research and development, they're just thinking about the quality part of it. So to understand and know the KPIs, and when we look at this, eloquent lips are unsuited for a godless fool. Even the greatest system in the world that's not communicated and not communicated through the lips is not going to have any power at all. In verse number 12, better to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than a fool bent on his folly. And so when we look at this, it's better, you imagine a person who hasn't communicated their KPIs, or we don't understand what those indicators are, it's better to meet a bear robbed of her cubs than a fool bent on folly. What is a fool bent on folly? A person who does not communicate their KPIs to the rest of the crew. Verse number 15, acquitting the guilty and condemning the innocent, the Lord detests them both. So when we look at this, if we understand and know what the KPIs are, then we can know how to be able to treat the different people, because we'll know what is important to them. In verse number 18, it says, one who has no sense shakes hands in a pledge and puts a security up for a stranger. What are your KPIs for the systems that you want to be able to create? Because a lot of times what will happen is one who has no sense shakes hands in a pledge. A lot of times people will make pledges because it'll bring bottom line profit, but or top line revenue. But if your KPI or your key performance indicator is, hey, I want to make sure that we have the highest profit margin possible, but we want to have the highest integrity, then sometimes if that's not communicated and people don't understand what that KPI is, then they're not going to be able to make sure that they're in line with that all the time. In verse number 27, it says, the one who has knowledge uses words with restraint, and whoever has understanding is even tempered. Imagine that. When you know what the key performance indicator is, then you have the patience and the humility to be able to walk through it and not have to fudge the numbers. The last question that we have here is, how do you want to feel in the end? And I'm not going to go through every one of these verses, but in 4 through 5, I thought it was important. 4 and 5, it was important. A wicked person listens to deceitful lips, and a liar pays attention to destructive tongue. Whoever mocks the poor shows contempt for their maker. Whoever gloats over disaster will not go unpunished. How do you want to feel at the end of it? Do you want to feel amazing? Do you want to feel uplifted? Do you want to feel empowered? Do you want to feel like you can help other people to be able to do it? We'll take that into account in verse 8, verse 9, verse 17, verse 19, verse 20, and we finish with verse 25. A foolish son brings grief to his father and bitterness to the mother that bore him. How do you want to feel at the end? If we start with these questions, and I'll review them quickly, is how can I quantify results? How can I quantify the results? What is that exactly? What is that exactly to you? Number 2 is, how long are you committed to the process? Number 3 is, what are your KPIs? What are the specific KPIs that will put you in the place that you feel that you're performing at the highest level and they're the best for the company and the vision? And lastly is, how do you want to feel at the end? And I think that's one of the most important, is the vibe. Like, how do you want to feel? How do you want your people to feel? How do you want your customer to feel? And that way, what we understand is, in that question, is, how important are my systems? You can answer that question. Proverbs 17, the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day, I don't think ever disappoints. 3,000-year-old wisdom that honestly, when you go to it, first you read it and then it'll read you. My name is Kelly Cardenas, and I'm officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.